Hello and welcome back, Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Josh McQuistion back in Houston for, I guess, a 24-hour layover, if you will. I know you're headed back up this way. More Brent Venables camps ahead next week. They had the third one on Thursday over at the indoor facility, I guess, slash the practice field. Like the first two, Josh. Welcome in. Like the first two, Thursday was a really good camp and a number of guys that we will get into in this recruiting report.
The thing that's becoming the theme is we have a list of guys we expect, and you're like, okay, that's pretty solid. Like that's a good group. Like we knew Jaden O'Neal, we knew Peyton Houston, a lot of the guys we're going to talk about. But then there's always a few extra guys that you're like, I didn't know anything about that guy. Like, and so it is really, it's adding to the depth. And so even if those guys maybe aren't OU guys that we didn't know about, it lets you get a good feel for the guys that are. Like, okay, they're clearly better than these good players. So again, it just gives you a little more context than I think we've had in years past, where like a guy just showed up and dominated, but you didn't really know what it meant.
Yeah, I mean, there are several guys that showed up Thursday. The freshman from 2028, who, I mean, he was
the big Marcus Faka. Is that how we're gonna say it?
Sure.
Fakatoa. I don't know. We might have to bleep that. We'll work with it, though.
I think it would be Faka 2, wouldn't it? There's no the TOA is not happening.
But he was unbelievable.
We'll have plenty of time to learn it because he is just going to be a freshman in high school. And when you people see this kid, your jaw's going to drop, because that's about what happened with me when Josh was like, look at this guy. He's going to be a freshman. 2028. It seems like there's something in the water out there across the country. I have no idea what it is, but there's a number of these guys that have come through the camp that have been just incredibly gifted from a physical standpoint. A lot to get into. I think that the best place to start, Josh, obviously Kevin Sperry was back down. Tristan Haynes was back down. A number of OU commits, and even some guys that we hadn't seen in the camp setting, including Malik Hawkins, who was really impressive. But let's start in the 2026 class. We'll start with the quarterbacks. They were kind of the, I guess, the big storyline of the day, if you will. The arrival of Jaden O'Neal, 2026 quarterback out of Long Beach, California, Narbonne High School, 6'3", 200. Simply put, probably one of the better players in the 2026 class. Obviously a top 50 guy in the On3 300 rankings, Josh. And every once in a while, it's always good to see like the hype lived up to the billing on Thursday for Jaden O'Neal.
Yeah, and I don't think Jaden planned it, but the way he kind of came in late, we saw him, he comes in to the end, like it looked like, like an old Willis Reed, like he's coming in to save the day.
Everybody was all the cameras went to that direction of the facility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was so it was just so funny because there was such disappointment because it started to leak. People were saying, "Oh, he's not going to work out." He decided not to. And I had talked to, I told you guys, I talked to him the day before, and he was pretty clear that he was going to work out. And so when word started to get out, I hit him up again and said, hey, man, did I have this wrong? And he goes, no, I'm on my way right now. I'm going to work out. So I don't know where that came from, but there was a narrative early in camp that he had chosen not to work out. But when he did, I mean, you're right, Eddie. Like, there's not a lot you could find to be disappointed with. Like, he is, we talk about it all the time. We see guys listed at 6'3" and 200 pounds like he is. Well, you assume, okay, he's 6'1" and some change, and he's 185, 190 pounds. You can usually take 2 inches and 10 pounds off any of these guys. And that's not the case for Jaden O'Neal. I would say, if anything, he might be a little bigger than 200 pounds. Like, he's a big, sturdy dude. And, I know watching him on tape, he's a plenty good athlete. He can move around. But like, George was sitting there when we were outside watching one-on-ones, and I thought it was the best quarterback day we'd seen so far, even outside of the three guys that we all know. But it looked different coming out of his hand than every other guy we watched.
I think, Josh, the first thing I did was, I think it was a week ago or so that we saw Darion Coleman, the other, 2026 quarterback that Oklahoma's been looking at. And our first reaction to him was, oh, he's a little bit small. Jaden O'Neal's was, oh, he's pretty big. I mean, he's every bit of 6'3", well put together. And I would also say the way he throws the ball, his throwing motion, it's very smooth. You can tell he's very comfortable. Just watching him in these clips, like it comes naturally to him. And you guys were outside when he was doing some just like routes on air.
Yeah.
You guys were out watching the linebackers and DBs, and I stayed in and watched him throw. And they just let him kind of just throw some deep balls, like just said, okay, just run and just see the kind of arm talent. He threw some absolute bombs on a dime, dropping it in the bucket. You can kind of, I mean, obviously he didn't catch that ball, but I mean, this dude had a cannon. That was the first thing that I really noticed, is like the way he threw the ball was just, it was just different than everybody else. And we'll see Peyton Houston here in a second, the 2027 quarterback, who I really liked him too. But Jaden O'Neal, I thought in terms of arm talent, he was clearly, I think, even with Kevin Sperry, I think has more arm talent.
We had talked about Jaden O'Neal and just the recruiting aspect of it outside of, kind of where Oklahoma stands. I know that there was a lot of buzz coming in. Chad Simmons had done some reporting on it, as well as Steve Wiltfong with On3, just in terms of kind of where Oklahoma was. You've caught up with Jaden post-visit, or I guess camp. He told you Oklahoma was the leader. I guess, where do you think that stands now? How much does that mean for Oklahoma that he has basically named them the number one after a busy month and seeing a number of programs? Obviously, very positive reviews from Jaden O'Neal post-camping, post-visit to Norman.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy that's been to Texas, Colorado, Florida State, Miami. Now he's at Oklahoma. I think he still has Michigan, Michigan State, I want to say Oregon maybe. Like, he's got several visits left. But coming into all these trips, I had heard from several people like Oklahoma's really laid a pretty strong foundation here. And talking to Jaden O'Neal, I know everybody reacted to the number one thing, and I know he mentioned it to a couple other reporters as well. But what I will say that I thought was interesting was it's not just like, oh, he knows Brent Venables, or, oh, he likes this. Guys, he was talking about like random staffers. Like, I mean, he knows that staff kind of top to bottom from an offensive perspective. So that's usually a really good sign. And again, with the number one thing, the way he said it, I literally stopped him in the interview and I said, "Are you okay with that being out there? Do you want to report that and say that?" And he goes, "Yeah, you can have, and so it was very absolute." And just talking to some sources, talking to, his father, talking to Jaden himself. I think there's a lot of reason for confidence. You never want to count on anything and say anything's done, but I think it would take something pretty special to knock Oklahoma out of where they are right now.
That would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would be kind of the big first win for Seth Luttrell, right? Because, and not to say, I mean, keeping Kevin Sperry is a win in itself, but that wasn't a kid that he necessarily recruited to Oklahoma. That was a Jeff Lebby guy. But to go out and get somebody like Jaden O'Neal, I mean, that would be huge for Seth Luttrell.
It'd be a nice splash. And I guess in a way you could say, like, if you really wanted to debate it, you could say like his first recruiting win was just keeping Jackson Arnold in general. Yeah. But from a high school standpoint, going out and getting somebody, and I think the storyline or angle that they're going into Los Angeles basically to get a guy that is in somebody else's backyard would probably get Seth Luttrell quite a bit of brownie points around here.
Guys, if you would have, I was trying to think about this morning. If you'd have given me odds that Muskoge's finest, his first quarterback he lands at Oklahoma is a kid from Orange County.
Sure.
Like, what? That wouldn't have even, I don't think you could have given me odds that would have suckered me into that bet. Would have been very Kevin in the Office. Like, if it's 1,000,000 to 1, you always take that bet. But like that's about what it would have taken to make me think, yeah, that's the guy he's going to land. That's where he's going to go. But again, I mean, they really like Seth Luttrell. Speaking to, for those that haven't gone to the site yet, the Sooner Scoop is up. It's, got up before lunch today. And Trey Taylor, the 2027 offer, he's already talking about making a return visit, and he talked about how much he likes Seth Luttrell. It takes me back. When he was hired, I talked to several guys, both high school coaches and some college coaches that had worked with him, and everybody was like, "Kids love this guy. He's kind of mercurial. He can be whoever he needs to be. If he's got to connect with this guy on this level, he can do that." So again, and I'm not putting this on OU fans or anybody else. It's for me too, knowing that I think the idea we have of Seth Luttrell is maybe not exactly who he is, especially in recruiting.
Well, and that kind of leads us into the second quarterback that was there that we'll highlight here, and that is Peyton Houston, the 2027 quarterback. I mean, it's crazy to think, like, they possibly might have had three guys in a row, literally in a row throwing. 2025 in Kevin Sperry, 2026 in Jaden O'Neal, and perhaps it's 2027 is going to be Peyton Houston, who also earned an offer on Thursday. Junior to be out, or sophomore to be out of Evangel Christian Academy. I thought he was super impressive, like both of you. I know that we were both kind of intrigued with what Peyton Houston had brought to Norman on Thursday.
Yeah, the way it all works now, I mean, there's a world where these three guys could be OU's quarterback room, probably, let's say, in the spring of 2027, because we know how the quarterbacks move around. Like, I don't know that it would last long, but there is, again, there's a reason that quarterback looked so good yesterday. And I will say, kind of the same note we started on with Jaden O'Neal. When Peyton Houston walked in, you were like, wow, this guy's more physically put together. Like, look at his lower body for a young guy just going into his sophomore year. I mean, that's a really solidly put together quarterback, not kind of one of these long, stringy guys that you're kind of waiting for him to grow into his body. And again, knowing the athlete he is, there wasn't a lot that he didn't check off yesterday. I would say pretty early in drills, I was like, yeah, this kid's getting an offer today. Like, there wasn't much doubt. And you kind of had that feeling coming in. I knew he was a guy who you really liked even beforehand. I think we had mentioned it on the podcast. It's just a guy that Oklahoma had identified. Seth Luttrell had already been down there to see him this spring. So, again, I can't find a lot of flaws. And I do want to say, there's been several people that are like, oh, the receivers were terrible. It wasn't a great receiver group. But I think you also have to acknowledge it was a really good group of DBs, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But, there's been a few people like, oh, there was a drop. Actually, one of the plays, it was a DB broke up the play. It was Malik Hawkins just breaks up a play, and it looks like he drops the ball, but he was just a corner that kind of got in the way. So, again, I liked almost everything we saw to Peyton Houston, and I thought he was more than deserving of that offer.
Can we go back to that clip of where it just pans to Josh looking dumbfounded?
It's a little cameo.
That's a little cameo.
I thought you looked great.
That made me laugh out loud. I was not expecting that.
That is why we have Josh wearing that Sooner Scoop shirt as often as possible. We don't need to see the buttons hanging on for dear life as Josh's gut just hangs. So that was there's no, yeah, that's not good. You know what that is? That's a wake up call. Like we gotta start eating a lot more fruit and vegetables.
Oh my gosh, I was not ready for that.
I will say, like, on the Peyton Houston stuff too, it really kind of hurts me. Just another reminder of how old I'm getting, that he talked about basically how he's grown up idolizing Kyler Murray. And that, one of the reasons of interest for Oklahoma, it just was like, oh God, we're getting to that point now where Kyler Murray is being looked up to. And not to say that he's not a good role model. All that.
I mean, it's crazy too. Just, and we'll get to the 2028 kid here in a little bit. That makes me feel old, and I'm young compared to you guys.
I'll have gone to my 20-year reunion by the time he graduates college.
But Josh, I wanted to ask you about Peyton Houston just real quick, because I think that it was very clear, like, throwing wise. I liked his throwing motion. I thought that he had like really good velocity on the ball. He was accurate. You saw him throw the deep ball. Is he a dual threat guy though? Because obviously we don't get to see these guys run around a whole lot. But is he somebody that is also a bit of a runner?
Absolutely. Now, I mean, again, just because we've just brought him up, we're not talking about Kyler Murray. It's not that level of a runner, but very, very capable. I would say, for what I've seen, and again, very young guy, so the tape is somewhat limited. But I would maybe like a Trevor Knight, like as a comparison, like good athlete, absolutely can run, going to put up a pretty good 40 time. But not a guy that's going to be his bread and butter. I mean, he really prides himself on being a passer. I will say, George, kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, probably the cleanest mechanically, I thought, of the guys that we saw. Like, I thought his motion, there was a clip, and it's in and it may be in this reel that we just watched. I might have missed it. where he's throwing side by side with Kevin Sperry. And this is no shot at Kevin Sperry, but they wind, it's a drill where they're doing the same thing and they wind on about the same timeline. And that ball is out of Houston's hand just a split. Right here. You can watch it. Like, look at them. They're going through the drill simultaneously and they're just firing out to their right. And look, okay, ball gone. Like, it's just a little faster from Houston. And that's just something that stood out to me when I was watching it. Now, Kevin Sperry's an older guy. I think there's something to be said for him just kind of like, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to do this right. While Peyton Houston's trying to earn an offer. So it's a little different, and I fully get that. But I think it's a good embodiment of just how quick his release was. Like, because when he made up his mind, the ball was gone.
And I know, Eddie, we talked a bit about Jaden O'Neal, and obviously he has a lot of top schools after him. Peyton Houston's got some pretty good offers too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember. We went over it yesterday. But I can't remember
I had
some
the
of
list out a second ago.
Texas A&M, Ole Miss. I mean, he's got some top level, not just because there's some guys that have Power 5 offers and there's some, or God, I got to get used to it, Power 4 offers. And then there are guys that have like the elite, programs in the top 10. And he's got 4 or 5 of those already now with Oklahoma joining the race. But like Eddie said, I talked to him a little bit last night. He makes no bones about it. Oklahoma's a special offer for him. He's very excited about it. Him putting that Kyler Murray graphic in his tweet announcement, that was not coincidental. This is a guy that really looks up to him. And Eddie, if it makes you feel at all better, during Kyler's Heisman campaign, this kid was about 10 years old. So yeah, that should help you.
That's what's crazy about this though. Quarterback recruiting is like, those quarterbacks that those guys grew up idolizing obviously played for Lincoln Riley, who's no longer here. But I think that the quarterback position and the ties it has to the university and just all of that, I think kids, that doesn't go unnoticed. Like Seth Littrell's done a really good job. I don't want to take anything away from him, but these kids understand that there has been a long line of great quarterbacks play at OU. And I think that matters.
No doubt. Texas, Mississippi State, A&M, Ole Miss, Tech, and now OU are his offers.
And a super quick note, in speaking to some people around Jaden O'Neal, I don't think the family's going to have a terribly hard time fitting into OU's feelings on certain coaches that may have departed. I think that's all going to work out fine. So I think they'll be they're happy with the choice of Oklahoma if that's what it ends up being from a quarterback coach perspective.
I'm sure it's just the cold weather in Big Ten country that they don't want to play in. All right, let's get into some of the Oklahoma commits because this I think was probably. I know it was the first time that we had seen him, George, but Maliek Hawkins, I thought he was excellent on Thursday. Part of that quarterback group, obviously, Michael Hawkins' little brother, the son of Mike Hawkins that formerly played at Oklahoma. I thought he was excellent. He was very physical. That was one of the things that you had noted, George. Yep. What did you think of seeing Maliek Hawkins on Thursday out at Oklahoma's camp?
Oh, I thought... Sorry, you said George. I was ready for George to answer. I wanted to hear his thoughts.
Oh,
either or.
I mean, I just thought, there was a couple times that you saw him in one-on-ones where he's playing press coverage, and he is just very physical at the line of scrimmage, which I think that's what you want to see from your corners is you want to be very physical, and then even down when it's a competitive catch, look at him right here. I mean, that's great physicality, and he's running stride for stride with the kid. And that was a good wide
too.
That was a good wide receiver too. He had some nice catches that day. So I think that was kind of what stood out to me, Josh, is that the physicality was there, the speed was there. I think his ability to turn his hips and go was another thing that not that I wasn't expecting that, but I was just impressed by.
I think everybody knows. Like, I'm going to be honest when I have questions and when I'm not sure about a guy. And a lot of it with Malik was just I hadn't had a chance to see much of it. So, like, it wasn't so much about him as just, like I didn't like him. I just didn't know. And watching him out there, my opinion of him changed incredibly. Like, I thought he was so good. Right here, you see him just staying in phase. I mean, sure, he's getting a little grabby with his hands, that kind of stuff. But, like, just all day long, like, he did such a great job of reading receivers, reading what their hips, trying to figure out what they're doing to him. You didn't see him like some of these other corners just get lost out there in space. Like, okay, like I'm matching this guy. I'm going to run him downfield. Okay, he's going to work the out. I know what I want to do. He looked like a guy that had spent a lot of time working with Jay Valai. Like, just okay, I know if I want to turn, I need to open up 45 degrees here, or I need to really open up and just kind of get down the field like that right there. I mean, he's just on the inside hip the whole way. Even if that receiver makes the catch, it's going to be incredibly difficult. It's just making really tight windows for the quarterback, and I thought he did it all day. So, again, I've got a lot of on-3 ranking stuff I'm going to have to add. I always do after a camp like this where I get to see a lot of guys. Malik Hawkins, absolutely a guy I'm going to write up and say, hey, we need to look again at this guy, and I will use some of this tape because a lot of this, I mean, I don't mean to oversell. This is like teach tape stuff. Like, this is doing exactly what you're supposed to do at the position.
And I think Josh too, for me, is like when you have defensive backs that are physical right off the bat, they're easier to like maybe teach because like, sure, some of these plays he's grabbing maybe a little too much and maybe in a game you get a PI or whatever. I think you would rather have a guy like that than a guy that doesn't want to get physical at that position, because if you want to win, like, you have to be able to do things like that where you're a little touchy with the guy. And so I think that to me was like, okay, like this kid has that I guess, it's cliche to say, but like dog in him in terms of like the physicality and all of that. Like he certainly has that, which you want in your corner. You don't want your corners to be timid.
Sure. How much do Josh?
No,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, and it's one of those things, guys, we watched SEC teams do this to Oklahoma for years, where they'd get to the bowl game and they'd get super physical. And sure, Oklahoma might get one PI here or there, but there were 4 or 5 plays where they didn't get it and OU goes 3 and out. And so I think that's Brent Venables' methodology, like that we're going to be physical outside. We're going to force you to make the call if that's what you're going to do. But for every one you make, there's probably 4 or 5 they're going to get away with. And again, that's not singular to OU. That's something Georgia does, Alabama does, because you're just not going to keep throwing the flag over and over again. If nothing else, you're just going to get numb to it a little bit. So again, I think and the thing I will say, and I know we need to move on, is he fits in, guys. I mean, like we talked about this when they took Tristan Haynes. Look at the size of these corners they're bringing in. Tristan Haynes is enormous. Like, you don't have to guess where he is when he's out there. Same with Malik Hawkins. The second we walked out, Eddie and I both like, well, there he is. Like, you knew it. So there's a lot of size. And, Michael Hawkins, his dad, former OU player sitting on the sideline, looks like he could still play. Like, yeah. I mean, you're like, I line that dude up. So there's a lot of good genetics on OU's side there.
Tremendous amount of pedigree too. I know that you spoke very highly about Mike Hawkins Sr. coming out of high school. Said maybe one of the best.
He is, from a physical talent standpoint, I can't think of more than 1 or 2 I would put ahead of him in my time. Now, it was early in my, the guys you see early on always kind of stick in your head. That's just part of it. But I don't think people will ever understand how gifted Michael Hawkins Sr. was. Like, he was, if everything could have worked out for him, he's a first-round pick and probably, a multi-year Pro Bowler. I mean, he was that kind of talent.
Should be interesting to see how Malik, I guess, kind of develops here over it, when you remember that he's still going into his senior season, as is Alex Shieldknight, who was in Norman on Thursday morning, camping with Miguel Chavis, as well as Todd Bates. What'd you think about his performance in terms of going against a pretty good offensive line group? Alex Shieldknight, if he could just, I don't know what was going on with his shoes or cleats during the one-on-one session, but he obviously showed off some pretty impressive athletic ability.
Yeah, he did. And these are the kind of drills where this is what you want Alex doing. Like, and I don't mean like in a game. This is the stuff you want him working on. So I think that's really interesting because he went through it a few times. Chavis ran him through that drill where it's just about change of direction, because there's no question. Like, you talk about work rate, ethic, like all the stuff that we know Oklahoma believes in as a staff, from Jerry Schmidt to Brent Venables to Miguel Chavis. They want guys who are just good for the fight at all times. And like, that's who Alex Shieldknight is. Like, he's 100% that kind of guy. And my only question has ever been just like, what are his movement skills like? Can he be that twitchy edge guy? And I don't know that he's ever going to be like a R. Mason Thomas. Like, I don't think that's a fair thing to expect. But now that he's starting to put weight on, you're seeing him get bigger. You can see a role for him. You can see where this might go. And again, I have talked about it before. As he gets bigger, I can't help but think, like, could he be a interior pass rusher in third down situations? Could they do some stuff with him? Because, like I said, you can see it in this tape. He's so good with his hands. As he learns to get better with dipping that shoulder and how to kind of properly get around the inside of the tackle, or excuse me, the outside of the tackle, I think he's only going to get better and better. Because there were times he flashed in this camp, and there were times where he really had some problems with some of the longer offensive tackles, and that's just always going to be an issue for him. He's always going to give up some weight, some length, some height, and he's got to figure out how to manage that.
Yeah, Josh, I think my takeaway from him is that he's still pretty raw prospect. Like, he's got a ways to go, and I'd like to see him, like you said, he needs to put on some more weight. I'd also like to see him maybe grow an inch or two. I think he's listed at 6'2". It'd be awesome if he could get up to like 6'4". But I still like him as a prospect. Like, I think that he had, like Josh said, he had some moments, and we saw him in some of those clips, like, that he just went right by guys. And I think he's probably gotten better over the last year. So I'm interested to see what he looks like a year from now. And again, he's not a guy that I think we would anticipate coming in and playing a lot as a freshman. But if you told me by like his junior year that he's just a really solid player for Oklahoma, I would probably agree with you.
I know that we've talked about it before, and in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it means a whole lot, but I do think it means something. I love these kids that are coming in, and they're coming from great football programs too. And you see that at Wagner. You also see that at Carl Albert, where Marcus James, Oklahoma linebacker commit, also in the 2025 class, was in Norman on Thursday. And simply put, Josh, I don't know any other way to say it than he is one of those kids that fits the bill of every time I see him, he looks a little bit better, a little bit bigger than the time before.
First of all, Eddie, pro segue. Wagner to Carl Albert. That's not an easy leap to make, and you did it beautifully.
Some state championship
just want to give credit where it's due.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I can say I know Eddie and I had the same reaction. We walked out. We knew, like, I knew Marcus was there, but I didn't really have, like, I wasn't looking for him as I looked over to the linebackers, and I saw the Kaden Henderson kid, but I'm like, who's the huge guy in the red shorts? And then I kind of walked over to you, and I was like, yeah, there's some good-looking linebackers over there. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's Marcus. And, guys, I saw Marcus 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, every time you see him, he's a little bit bigger. But look at that clip right there. That is a undersized tight end from Westmore. A good player, good, solid, might even work himself into like a preferred walk-on role at Oklahoma. Like, that's a good athlete that and this right here in this clip that Kerry's got running. Look at Marcus just turn and run down the field with this kid who he's probably 3 inches taller than and 20, 25 pounds heavier than. Like, is that perfect coverage? No, but it shows me the athleticism that he can learn what he needs to from Zach Alley. He can become that kind of guy in coverage. And this is, I believe that's him against Ryder Mix right there, who I know we'll talk about a little bit later, but is a OU offer at tight end and a super physical guy in his own right. So, Marcus, my question was, could he refine himself as a linebacker? Because his physical abilities, his athleticism, they're off the charts. They're what you're looking for. He's big enough, guys. He could grow into defensive end if he so chose. Like, he's that big and long. He's clearly bigger than Alex Shieldknight, who we're just talking about. But at the same time, when you watch him turn and run and do some of this stuff, it's just like that's freaky. That's the kind of stuff that's why OU wasted absolutely no time in offering him.
I mean, he's a beast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's simply put. Like,
it's going to be exciting to see kind of what he turns into once he gets to campus.
I think just development wise, like Josh said, like, he could put on some more weight. The way he runs, you're just like, okay, that's a guy that can go sideline to sideline. I mean, how much does he weigh right now?
It's a good question. Have you asked him, Josh, what he weighs?
I'd say it's got to be 225, 230. I mean, he's a big kid. You guys, do you want to know how much his body has changed in the last year? When Eddie and I were over there in the spring of 23 interviewing him, he was talking about OU or talking to him about Cheetah. Like, that's how much he's changed in a year. And again, I talked about it when I saw him a few weeks ago at Carl Albert's team camp. The maturation he's shown, like, this is clearly a guy that soaks up information. He learns a ton and is just going to, I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back. I know Tristan Haynes is going to be back probably for the final 2 sessions as well. It wouldn't shock me if Marcus comes along and just tries to soak up all he can from Marcus James, because I think from Zach Alley. I think he's a really sharp kid, and it shows how much his game has grown in the last year. Like, he is a guy that now, rather than just being a great athlete playing linebacker, he looks comfortable doing small parts of it. Now, obviously, there's still so much more to learn.
One of the other guys that was in Norman on Thursday, one of Marcus James' teammates, along with Tristan Haynes. I thought the Trinae Washington experience over at tight end, seeing him work with Joe John Finley for the first time, not for the first time, but to see it, that was the first time I had seen him work with him. It's kind of more interesting than maybe we thought it was, because Trinae Washington's been kind of an interesting project for Oklahoma, taking him as a tight end.
It really was. And Eddie, I couldn't agree more, because what I liked is being able to stack him next to guys like Ryder Mix, like guys that have offers, are seen as pure inline tight ends. And Trinae, I mean, while he's leaner than Ryder Mix, you didn't see it in the frame where you were just like, well, he'll never put on the weight he needs to. Like, guys, even from again, I saw him 3 weeks ago, and I walked out of that thinking, he's still so lean. I don't know. But then watching him out there with these guys, I was like, has he spent the last 3 weeks just eating 5,000 calories every day? Like, and it's not that he looks bad or anything. He just looked more like, okay, maybe this tight end thing could work. Maybe this could make sense. And I was like, some of this stuff here, he was more physical than I anticipated him being. So I thought Trinae Washington answered some questions yesterday.
Will the biggest question for him just be in terms of how he holds weight moving forward, how his body continues to develop? He seems like, obviously pretty young guy, all things considered. You would seem that he probably has another growth spurt in him at some point.
I'm never, like, usually by the time the guys are juniors, I pretty much accept, like, they pretty much are who they are. But could he? Sure. But I think more, like you said, Eddie, it's about filling out his frame. Like, what can he get to reasonably? Looking at him yesterday, I would say, guys, 205, somewhere in that ballpark.
That's fair.
I mean, if he got to, in 2 or 3 years, that 225 mark where we're talking about with Marcus James, 230, something like that, I don't think that's out of the question. It's just about him doing it gradually, rather than, like I said, putting on a big, massive weight and losing some of the things that do make him special as a receiver and, just a pass catcher out in the space.
Well, I think he's not, like, people, like, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he's going to be the guy that you're putting his hand in the dirt a lot to do, like, goal line blocking. But, like, he could certainly be maybe more like a Kaden Helms guy where you flex him out and do some different things with him. I think that's kind of the vision.
Speaking of tight ends, Bauer Sharp was out there yesterday. He looks
good.
great.
Looks good.
Like, he has definitely added 5-10 pounds.
Yeah.
Here over the course, even since post spring.
He looks
Obviously,
really
they're
good.
in the middle of summer workouts. Let's stay in the tight end position group, I guess, because on Thursday we also had Ryder Mix in to Norman, a legacy in a way to Oklahoma. His father played baseball for Oklahoma. Is that correct, Josh? What did you think of his performance on Thursday? He looked really good.
Yeah, his dad was a pitcher for Oklahoma in the 2000s. Pretty good one from what I've gathered. I won't claim that I was on campus at the same time, but I won't say that I knew it well at that point in time. So, but yeah, Ryder, guys, I would say he said this, it was that clip right there, and you kind of couldn't see it, but Brent Venables is watching him. He comes over kind of to the left of the camera that you're looking at right now, and I asked Ryder, I was like, did you know he was watching when you did what he did? And he goes, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to knock the kid over. But, I mean, Ryder just buries I can't even remember who it was. I think it was a player I knew, and I felt kind of bad about it. But I just like the way he wanted to set a tone. Like, I'm here. I'm a big physical tight end. I'm going to play tough. I'm going to get my hands on people. And I mean, like that right there, like I think that's Trinae Washington.
Yes, it is.
And like, look at the pop in his hands. Like, you don't talk about that with tight ends very often, but just like watch him deliver. Again, Brent Venables right in the background, and boom, just takes him up off of his feet. That's, and I was joking around with Ryder Mix. I don't think, again, because he was kind of saying, like, I don't know if Brent liked that. He was kind of worried that maybe he'd done too much. And I said, I don't think Brent Venables has ever looked at a tight end and said, that kid's just too physical. Like, we don't want that, So that is, again, an OU fit. And talking to Ryder Mix, I think Oklahoma is in a very good spot for him. I am absolutely considering putting in a prediction for him.
I think he's the best tight end prospect that has maybe camped so far, like pure tight end prospect. Because I like Trinae Washington, but again, I kind of view him as like a flex tight end. I think Mix was probably the best tight end that we've seen so far at camp.
If he's too physical, and you got Miguel Chavis over there, he's probably trying to talk him into moving him over to defensive end.
Yeah, no, but
Miguel
they
Chavis
need
is
the tight
watching
ends though
at camp. He just continuously coaches the entire time. All right, let's go into a couple of some new names, maybe some new names out there that have camped here over the course of, I guess, really on Thursday. Maybe one that camped last Saturday we'll get to as well. But Josh, you said it when we walked out there to the track on Thursday. Kaden Henderson was kind of the I guess the talk of the linebacker group, if you will, coming all the way from Tampa, Florida. He earns an offer from Jesuit High School, 2027 linebacker, and just simply put, one of those guys you walk out there and go, yep, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, guys, when we were sitting there, he showed up near the end of the morning session, and I think you all had left, and I was sitting there waiting to get a final couple of headshots of guys I needed pictures of, and as I'm doing it, I see this kid in all blue. Tampa Jesuit is the program he is from. All blue from head to toe. He's got either one of his coaches or his dad is there with him. I wasn't sure about that, but this is a 2027 guy you're watching on tape. This guy's going to be starting his sophomore year of high school, and there are certain guys that I look at and I'm like, that dude's from Florida. It's the length. Like, look at his arms. Like, that looks like a defensive end, like almost PJ Adebawore way, like in that length and that ability to just get in there. And again, he's young. He's going to need time. But to me, this was basically a show up, weigh in and measure it about where we think you should be. And then, hey, man, we're going to be just fine with an offer here. We're not worried about it. They know what a talent he is. I talked to Kaden a little bit following the camp. Definitely think he liked what he saw. It wouldn't be at all surprising if he were to return. And this is a guy where we'll start to get a better gauge for what Zach Alley is like. Like, as a recruiter, I know some people have kind of said, linebacker recruiting hasn't been where we thought it might be. We kind of thought Zach Alley was just going to light the world on fire from word go. That's pretty hard to do in this era. You have to have relationships from early on. And this is a guy Oklahoma's really establishing some connection with. But again, like, look at him just turning. I mean, that's safety stuff. Like, that's a kid that's probably 6'2", 205, 210 right now, and it's only going to get bigger and stronger. I've given a lot of words to something that's pretty simple. You walk out, look at him, watch him move around, and you're like, yep, that's a guy.
God, he was really impressive. So keep in mind, this kid's in 2027. He's going into his sophomore season.
Look at him jump that route.
It was an unbelievable play.
This is stuff Kerry got inside. I didn't see any of this stuff. That's unbelievable.
Some great camera work here by Kerry Murdoch. He's going to be speaking at the Eddie Brodasevich Videographer Camp this summer. Get your deposits in. $500. $500 or if you have a hot mom send a picture. Kind of one of those things. All right, the moment has come. The time has come, Josh. Maybe one of the biggest surprises, most impressive freshman to be I have ever seen. Like, I literally turned around to you at one point and was like, is he going to be a top 20 guy in the 2028 class? But he earns an offer on Thursday, 6'7", 260 out of Fontana, California, Orange Lutheran High School, Marcus Faka. Yeah.
For
guess
those
the freshman.
Watching, I don't think you have to guess who the 15-year-old freshman is, but it's the kid in the orange shoes. And honestly, he kind of hunches like that, and you don't notice how tall he is. And then all of a sudden, he'll kind of really stand up, and you're like, "Oh, good lord, he's huge." The guy, for reference, the guys behind him, in front of him in that video, their father played the NFL for about a decade, and they are Division I prospects themselves, and they are going into their junior year. They're two, this. I want to say the thing I've talked to Marcus quite a bit since camp, and I think he's been blown away by all the attention, notoriety. He's just a young guy. Guys, something I have learned, he is a native Alaskan. He moved to Los Angeles 2 years ago, and in his words, in search of football opportunities and training. This is a kid that's just learning what the heck he's doing. And he just bullied everybody. And the thing that shocks you, as a young guy, you're like, okay, he could be really twitchy, or he could be this or that or the other. He was bullying people. Like, he was just inside arm, like lifting guys up. Like, just, and I mean, in a couple of cases against Division I prospects that have Power 5 offers, and he's just using that inside arm. They can't get to his body because he's so long, and he would just run the corner. And then on the rare occasion when they could match him and they could get out there with him, he had a counter, like right there. Look at that. He just slaps the hands down, throws that guy down. And this kid was good. It's a kid from Illinois, 2026. Tony Balangani, I think is how you say his name. I hate to highlight him there, but he was good on the day. And he just got beat here again. Same deal. And I think once or twice he spins back inside. This is him against Hunter McKinney, a 2026 offensive lineman, son of Steve McKinney, who played in the NFL for a decade.
Josh,
I would say probably a top 10 camp performance I've ever seen, if you consider the context of he is a freshman in high school.
I don't think he lost a rep.
For me, it took it to the next level, too, because when you see what he is physically, which is obviously impressive considering his age, he took the coaching basically because they do those individual drills before. And obviously, Miguel Chavis was working with him quite a bit. But he took basically what they had been talking about, and they would go back after some of these one-on-one reps. And each one, it seemed like he was getting better.
Yeah, I feel bad for this kid right here because he was just overmatched.
That's a relative of an OU player. I don't want to go out and call him out because he is in the same class as Marcus is. So plenty of time for that player to improve. At some point, it was like somebody needs to grab him and be like, "This is deeper water than you're ready for yet." And I love that he wanted to go compete. It was just that he took several reps against Marcus, and you're like, I don't think I'd do that. Like that's just there are good juniors here that can't deal with this kid.
Well, we've watched a dozen.
The
reps
only
of this
rep
kid,
I saw him lose all day was to Jordan Caraway, and Jordan Caraway at that point hadn't won a rep, and immediately, Eddie, I don't know if you remember this. It happens, and you hear Miguel Chavis from the other side of the defensive line go again, and he makes Marcus go again. And that second rep, he just runs right past him.
Sure.
I think it was one of the clips we were looking at in that highlight reel, and you're just like, I mean, and I think I looked at you, and I was like, if that kid doesn't walk out of here with an offer, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what the point of any of this camp is if that's not good enough to get an offer.
We saw him get the offer too, because
they
didn't even they didn't even wait till the end of one-on-ones. They pulled him to the side.
We've seen enough,
and they're like, yeah, and they took the picture, and he celebrated and was like,
yeah, he had that moment where this massive 6'7" kid, and Carrie was relaying it to me, but he kind of jumped up and down. It's like, oh yeah, he is 14, 15 years old. This is a big moment for him.
And I will say, I had a few people, because I tweeted out something like, I'd be shocked if Oklahoma doesn't offer this kid. And people are like, you're kind of putting OU in a bad spot there, because if they don't, you've tweeted at him. Guys, I want you to know that was after this happened.
Sure.
I had no doubt that he was going to be offered. I just didn't want to take the kid's moment before he announces it. I want to let him have his time. But I would never do that and be like, yo, you better offer this guy. Who the hell am I? I'm not trying to be that dude. I was like, be prepared for this, because this guy is just an absolute freak of nature.
Very good player, and guess what? He's just about to start high school, so that's going to be a long road, a long journey for him, I'm sure, in his recruiting process. We did talk about there was a really good offensive line group on Thursday. I thought one of the better players out there was a guy that had an Oklahoma offer coming in, Maxwell Robinson out of Derby, Kansas, Josh.
Yeah, came in, and I'll be honest, a little shorter than I thought he was going to be. And I hate to be like, that's my starting point on him, because everything else checked the boxes. He can move his feet. He's really good with his hands. And to go, George used it earlier, so I can pull this, in as well. He's got some nasty, some dog in him. Like he likes to mix it up. He's not one of these kids, and I've seen it a lot of times at camps these last few weeks, where he's waiting for the contact. He's going to let the defensive lineman come to him. Nah, man, if you're in position and he can pop you with that inside hand, he's going to do look at him, just strike that kid. And that is what I saw from him all day. And as soon as the rep's over, boom, he's back in line. He's just one of those guys that I think if they gave him 5 straight reps, he'd take it. This is him against Shield Knight. And that's nasty. Because Shield Knight, we know, is a good player. And I mean, again, I know people took this like, oh, that's kind of bad. Alex got off balance, and Maxwell was ready for him. And that's something Alex is going to have to learn, guys, to turn this to Shield Knight a little bit. He's used to playing 4A guys that cannot physically match up with him. When he runs into a guy like this is what he's going to see every day in practice. So it's a little different thing. But that was him against Romare Smith, a kid from Houston, Ridge Point High School, that is, like I said, the son of former NFL defensive lineman Romare Smith. And I thought he had a really good day, and Max just hip tosses him. Now, I think he likes to do that a little too much. He's going to have to learn, you don't want to release the defensive lineman into the backfield. So just stay up, stay in front of him, pancake him if you must, but don't just throw him off into the wild. So again, I really like Maxwell Robinson. I'm kind of interested to see if maybe he becomes like a center target, because like I said, I think he's probably just a little shy of 6'3", and it kind of limits the range a little bit. But again, I get what Oklahoma likes here. I think he's absolutely a quality player. It's just about where does he kind of fit into that offensive line class in 2026. If OU can reel him in.
2 more guys to get into, and let's just stay on the offensive line, because you were talking about a possible center, situation, or maybe he develops into a center. A guy that we had talked about last Saturday in the recap as well, Gerald Mays. I know that you had talked to him. Maybe a little bit more information just in terms of Oklahoma's interest. Thought he had a really good day last Saturday, and maybe more interest after his performance on Saturday.
Yeah, spoke to Gerald, for those that I guess that will watch this and kind of know him, goes by JJ. The full quote is in the scoop, so I don't want to give away all of it out there, but there is no doubt that he got the impression during his visit that an offer could happen before the start of his junior season. I think he knows the coaching staff really liked him. What's interesting is, he talked about, OU wants to finish out their camp, look at what the numbers look like, and kind of take a look at it. Well, he's a player kind of similar to who we were just talking about in Maxwell Robinson. Really good athlete, really capable of playing center, guard. You can move him around. And it's kind of can both those guys be in the same class? I don't know if I worry about that at this point if I'm Oklahoma. If you like him, go ahead, offer him, and then kind of see where it falls. Because maybe Maxwell Robinson wants to stay in state and go to Kansas State or go wherever. And then, you kind of have Gerald Mays. You've made him a priority since early on. So to me, I thought he was good enough to have an offer during the camp. Again, I'm not that guy. I'm not saying I know better than anybody else. But I was really impressed. I liked his versatility. We know that's something Bill Bedenbaugh values. So, again, I think this is definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and could be kind of the Ryan Foje situation that I mentioned a couple recruiting reports ago, where they didn't offer him immediately, but they were pretty sure they wanted to, and once they did, they were kind of in the driver's seat.
You could read the Sooner Scoop more on Gerald Mays, as well as a bunch of other players. We'll be getting into all the official visitors, because there is a big official visitor weekend. That'll be in a separate video that you can check out right here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. Last but not least, he's been a little bit of a legend, I think, in some regard, just because it feels like we've been talking about him for a long time. You flip on the tape, though, and Cord Nolan, I thought he was super impressive. Another linebacker that camped at Oklahoma on Thursday, the 2026 athlete out of Bixby High School.
Yeah, we've talked about it for a while. He is a guy with a mentality, with the demeanor that Zach Alley, Brent Venables. He's going to be right up. Well, they're Alley. God, I really walked myself into that. I apologize.
You liked it.
But what I thought was interesting, and Eddie, I know you and I talked about this during the camp. Seeing him next to Kaden Henderson, seeing him next to Marcus James, you're like, okay, that's not as far off as I kind of had it in my head. Like, I think sometimes you get this idea in your head and you see him in the same circumstances and around the same players, and you're like, yeah, he's just too small. But seeing him next to Kaden Henderson, you're like, I mean, he's probably given up an inch and a half. But if he's 6 foot, okay, play ball. Like, I don't think a linebacker being 6 foot would be the reason Oklahoma wouldn't pursue him. Now, maybe there's guys that they like better. Maybe there's guys that, are as good of players that do physically kind of, go above the median line. But just what we saw, the movement skills are there. He has the right mentality, and kind of like what you're talking about earlier, Eddie, I think I don't know if it's been a concerted effort, but it's pretty hard for me to ignore the focus that Oklahoma has placed in so many great programs with the Carl Alberts, the Wagners, Bixby, Denton Geyer. You go down the list, a lot of programs that have had a lot of on-field success are getting a lot of Oklahoma's attention in the last few years.
He's got that Bixby look too, with that goatee. That's very Bixby.
I'm going to defer to you. Is that a
Bixby.
South Tulsa thing?
Oh yeah. Well, not South Tulsa. It's a Bixby.
Just
thing.
a Bixby thing.
Those people out in Bixby,
Interesting.
They're built different.
TJ Eckert. I don't know if he can grow a goatee. We'll have to check in with him on that.
But he looks good though physically.
Yeah,
I mean, that looks like a Bixby football player.
And he also just he has that element that I think that we had talked about when Brent Venables and they came into town, just in terms of identification and just football player, go tackle football. It seems like
you can tell he's physical.
Cord Nolan's that. Yeah,
I mean, he knocked the crap out of that one
knocking guys down during one-on-ones.
Yeah.
Between linebacker and running back. So really good camp. That kind of wraps up day 3. Some of the top performers from Brent Venables football camp. 2 more camp sessions coming up next week, Tuesday and Thursday, that we will all be at. And it should be really interesting because the first 3 days have, I think, garnered now 24 new offers have been sent out from Brent Venables football camp, which is just, I mean, it's not bizarre by any means. It's just kind of crazy. Guys coming in and working their ass off and getting those things. So, all right, Josh, we appreciate it. We will hit you guys on the other side. We'll be talking about the official visit weekend, which is massive this weekend coming up in Norman. So for Josh, George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonersGroup.com YouTube page.